Professor Kucernak, why we need hydrogen during energy and traffic transition to carbon-neutral economy?
Well, of course, one of the important aspects of transition to a carbon-neutral economy is the development of renewable electricity from various sources, wind, solar, etc. But of course, one of the issues we have with that electricity is that it might, one day it might be here and the next day it might not. The sun might not be shining in the middle of winter, the wind might not blow, so we need some way of actually storing that electricity at a very large scale. And hydrogen is the ideal way of actually storing that because you can store it at a large scale. Hydrogen is already used at a very large scale. It's almost half of hydrogen is used to make ammonia. And an interesting fact is that 30% of the nitrogen in your body comes from ammonia that was made from hydrogen. Okay, and this is something we have to continue in the future. The world can't support people, without the production of ammonia and fertilizers based on ammonia.
With fertilizers, in your answer, you remind me on the projects of hydrogen valleys. There is one project near Chester, and one company which is producing fertilizers is included in that project. Why are those projects so important for this transition?
These hydrogen valleys are an important aspect associated with rolling out hydrogen usage in companies. Okay, and one of the ideas of that is that for both companies and for people. So we have hydrogen islands, which are areas where we can use hydrogen as an energy store, and hydrogen valleys, which are areas where we can actually supply hydrogen to people in their homes, but also to industries. And for those industries, some of those aspects are associated with heating or producing heat for industrial processes, for producing chemicals. Ammonia is one of the ones that I mentioned, but also for a range of different other aspects as well.
Green steel, for example.
Exactly, green steel. So moving away, one of the interesting aspects, for every ton of steel, you produce 1.5 tons of CO2. Okay, and the world produces something like 3 billion tons of steel a year. So this is a massive amount of carbon that you actually have to try and remove. And green hydrogen is a marvelous way of doing this.
One of the presumptions for cheaper production of hydrogen are surpluses of renewable energy sources. When will Great Britain have those surpluses?
That's a good question. So the aspiration in the UK is to have 55 gigawatts of wind turbines by 2030. Okay, and it's on course to actually have this much, just wind. Okay, not solar, just wind. The UK grid uses about 30 to 35 gigawatts of electricity on average. Okay, so you see, if the wind is all running, there is potentially a tremendous surplus by 2030. Of course, the grid will expand, more things will become electrified. But as we've already mentioned, one of the issues with renewable energy is that it is intermittent. Sometimes it's here, sometimes it's not. So you need to take that excess and store it as hydrogen.
What kind of role could play hydrogen in production of e-fuels without fossil fuels?
Exactly. So I think there are some very hard to decarbonize areas. For instance, for planes. Okay, where do you get the fuels needed for planes, the kerosene or whatever? And in those cases, the opportunity to take hydrogen and a biological source of carbon. Okay, so you have to think about where your carbon comes from, because even with an e-fuel, when you burn an e-fuel, you make CO2. So you don't want to take that CO2 from coal or the ground or something like this, because this is no different So really you need a different source of carbon, and the most obvious source of carbon is from biological sources. And this allows us to decarbonize some of the more difficult transportation aspects.
Christoph Weber, co-CEO of the company P2X Europe, which is developing a facility for producing hydrogen-based airplane fuel kerosene, said that they are extremely careful with the available manufacturing capacity and with the availability of raw materials like iridium, which is used as a catalyst in the polymer electrolyzers. Do you see that this is a big obstacle for development of hydrogen economy?
No, I don't really, because you know, polymer electrolyte electrolyzers do use iridium. The world, of course, iridium is a rare element. Okay, but one of the benefits is that iridium is used as a catalyst. It's used in relatively small amounts. The other aspect is that there are other sorts of electrolyzers available as well, ones which don't use rare elements like iridium. So there are two different approaches. You know, one is to use iridium, but to be careful to reduce the use of iridium and to make sure that we recycle iridium at the end of use after 5 or 10 years. You know, we extract the iridium because it's a valuable material, and then we use it again.
Circular economy.
Circular economy, exactly. And the other aspect is that there are other electrolyzers which don't use these sorts of materials. And also there's a lot of scientific research, even in my group, for instance, looking at materials to replace the iridium, which can operate in these systems.
You are researching solid polymer electrolyte fuel cells. How we use hydrogen for production of energy in the fuel cells, and what kind of fuel cells are polymer electrolyte fuel cells?
So fuel cells are almost exactly the same as a battery. Okay, the difference is that in the battery, the chemicals which react are stored within the battery structure. You know, you have your battery and it's got all, you know, you break open the battery, you can see all these powders and everything. The difference is a fuel cell, the fuel is stored externally. Okay, and it flows through the mass where the reaction happens, and that reaction involves a fuel, in this case hydrogen, and air, and the product is water. Okay, and it generates electricity. So, you know, these systems are silent, they have no moving parts. They operate very much like batteries, okay? It's just an electrochemical process. It converts the energy and the chemicals directly into electronic energy. So you can think about it as a sort of battery, but a battery that you can recharge very quickly. All you need to do is refill with hydrogen, and then you can actually generate more electricity.
Please explain how the hydrogen comes to a membrane and how is electricity produced.
Now I need a blackboard, okay? So what happens is that the overall reaction of hydrogen in a fuel cell reacting with oxygen is exactly the same as if you burnt that hydrogen, okay, and you generated heat. But this process doesn't generate any heat, any emissions like this. Instead, what happens is the fuel cell is actually made of a layer, like a sandwich, okay? And there are two catalysts, you know, which are maybe the slices of bread, and then there's something in the middle, which maybe is the meat or the cheese, which is the membrane material. The membrane material does not conduct electricity, doesn't conduct electrons, but it does allow, when the hydrogen reacts, it does allow the proton, which is produced when the hydrogen reacts, to travel from one through the electrolyte from one piece of bread to the other piece of bread, okay? And at the other piece of bread, this proton, which is moved across, reacts with oxygen from the air to produce water.
And leaves this electron.
And then it leaves, and so this process consumes an electron, and this process on this bread produces an electron. Okay, so it produces electron, consumes electron. The electron has to flow through an external circuit, you know, through an engine, electric engine or something, in order to get there, and that's how it operates.
Did your department have international scientific cooperation in the field of hydrogen, and what kind of benefits have been achieved by this cooperation for all participants?
Of course, and you know, we're involved in both national and international projects, you know, with EU projects. We're involved in also projects, worldwide projects. For me, it's always very useful to be involved in these projects because, of course, you get to understand the different environments in which these systems have to operate, because they have to operate everywhere. And also different scientists and different engineers from different parts of the world have different viewpoints, okay? You know, and it's always good to actually hear those and understand them. I think for me, one of the important things is I like to see the technology I develop get out into the real world. So I'm co-founder of 3 companies that is taking research from my laboratories and actually producing, these systems, fuel cells and these hydrogen sort of systems.
Did you reach some level of the finished product for the market?
Yeah, so one of them is already producing products for the market. The other ones are at a slightly earlier stage. So they're sort of at different, if you will, different stages of childhood to adulthood.
Is there any chance for cooperation with Croatian scientists?
Of course, I think that would be very, very interesting. I think Croatia has a marvelous renewable electricity energy opportunity, and the ability to convert that into hydrogen and then use that hydrogen is something that we actually have to think about. Realistically, for the world, this is a transition we have to make. We have to use much more renewable energy. We have to be able to store that energy, and we have to decarbonize all of the industries that operate at the moment.
Are there any impacts in the future and the current approach to EU funds for R&D for your team and British scientists in general?
I think it is more difficult than it was. It would be fair to say that. We look forward to the politicians resolving all the issues so that we can continue to work. Because as British scientists, we enjoy working with our European, compatriots.
What kind of breakthroughs we could expect in the hydrogen science researches in the coming years and decades?
I think, of course, we will have systems that are actually more efficient. I think one of the really important aspects that we need to think about for hydrogen is at the moment, when we produce hydrogen in an electrolyzer, we take water and we split water into hydrogen and oxygen. And we have to have both of those reactions happening. The reaction to produce hydrogen and the reaction to produce oxygen from the water. And it turns out the oxygen reaction, the one which produces the oxygen, the air that we breathe, is the difficult reaction. The hydrogen reaction is very easy, but we have to have both reactions occur simultaneously. So we end up expending a lot of energy on the oxygen reaction, which for us is not a useful reaction.
Not a product.
Not a useful product, exactly. And so the idea is to think, how can we produce hydrogen where instead of producing oxygen, we're also producing another valuable product? Because if we can produce 2 products simultaneously, then that will reduce the price of hydrogen, but also you get this other product as well. Yeah, and I think that's something where a lot of people are looking to do work in.
Now is green hydrogen still 5-6 times more expensive than the grey one?
Well, it's coming down a lot in price. Of course, the grey hydrogen is based upon natural gas, so natural gas is going up in price, and electricity is coming down in price. You see, so the cost of hydrogen is coming down much quicker than people 10 years ago, 20 years ago were saying. So I think very quickly the cost of hydrogen will become very, very reasonable.
Professor Kucernak, thank you for the interview.
Thank you very much.